Hello and welcome to Talking Books. I'm Jill de Villiers. The worst imaginable thing that can happen to a parent is the death of a child. It is especially incomprehensible when the child's life was short and filled with pain. The book we're going to talk about today is about one very special little boy who touched the lives of many in the brief 15 and a half months he was here on Earth. The book is Lessons from a Rainbow Unicorn, a real-life story of a father's loss. And the author is Fred Platt, the CEO of a JSE-listed company, Accentuate Limited. Fred, thank you so much for coming in and talking to us about this story.
Yeah.
As I was reading through the book, I went through a gamut of emotions. Early on in the book, I had great anger, great feelings of anger towards the medical profession and what had happened to you. And then I also had great feelings of enormous sadness and as I was progressing through the book. So please tell me a little bit about the story and about your beautiful son.
Yeah, Sam was born on the 9th of April 2015 and spent 15 and a half months in ICU, 13 and a half of that in a private hospital in Johannesburg, where we faced some serious challenges. He was undiagnosed. There were numerous failed diagnoses and operations. And eventually we flew him down to Cape Town. After just 2 weeks in Cape Town, he was positively diagnosed with a rare disease called central core disease, which was non-degenerative and certainly not life-threatening. But a couple of weeks later, he had contracted a number of hospital-induced superbugs while in Johannesburg, and he was reinfected and he passed away.
I think the worst thing for me reading the book is how helpless you felt in the early days of this. For the months that he was in the Johannesburg hospital, felt absolutely helpless.
Yeah, I think the disproportionate relationship that you have with a medical professional or professionals was very, very difficult, especially when there's no, or when you get to a situation where the trust relationship is damaged, where there's very little empathy, and where certainly your perception is that your child is just there. It's just patient X in bed Y, and very little attention is paid to the emotions, the problems and the challenges that you go through as a parent.
Do you find as well that there was a difference between the pediatricians, the doctors, the high level, the people who studied for so long, and then the other people, the nurses? You found that you had a lot more sympathy from the nurses and the support staff?
Yeah, absolutely. You know, I think the nurses were engaged. They spent 24 hours a day with Sam. There was this saying, "Don't look into Sam's eyes." He had beautiful eyes, and once they looked into it, they fell in love. So there was this wonderful relationship at one level, but at the other level, a totally distant and cold relationship, so much so that during the 13 and a half months that we spent in ICU, and Sam was on a ventilator intubated for that period, we weren't even allowed to contact the pediatrician on his cell phone. We had to contact him through the nursing staff or through channels.
Oh. So as well, when you wanted a second opinion, it caused a big stink in the hospital.
Yeah, it was as if we were challenging, as if we, at the end of the day, as a parent, I made two promises to Sam. I always say the first one was that I would give him the best possible chance, and the second one was that we would make sure that his legacy lives on. But in trying to give him the best possible chance, we needed to explore, we needed to understand. We weren't those difficult parents, we were those scared parents, and we were those parents that felt totally disempowered. It's not natural for you to leave your child in someone else's care, to just go home. It was a very, very difficult period.
And during this time, you were, as a CEO of a company, you were still running your business and trying to cope with having a child in hospital.
Yeah, it was a challenging period. You kind of had to get to the office, you had to do what you had to do, but every spare minute you were at the hospital, you were dealing with another diagnosis, with another problem, with another resuscitation, intubation, whatever it may be. And somehow you had to balance these two worlds, which sometimes, were quite unsympathetic towards you.
So you were even treated by some of the people like a nuisance and an irritation, if somebody actually said you were irritating.
Yeah, I think that the more we got concerned and the more we needed to know and the more we wanted to understand, the first couple of months you just gave it over and you hoped and you prayed and you believed that it would be okay. But as this progressed, you wanted to know more, you wanted to engage, you wanted to understand why they were taking blood from your kid every day, you wanted to understand why your kid wasn't coming off the ventilator, you wanted to understand why you were given another and another and another misdiagnoses. And in that process, I suppose we became those irritating parents.
So eventually you finally got a pediatrician from Cape Town to come up and look at Sam. Tell me a little bit about this.
Yeah, we tried earlier on, after about 6 months, to get a second opinion. It was very difficult because the doctors wouldn't allow the other doctors into the ward. It was quite a challenging period. But eventually we got a pediatrician up from Cape Town, and she traveled up with the nurse, and they had a look at Sam, and for the first time they gave us hope.
And that's why when everything changed, the attitude that you had from this pediatrician and her nurse who worked closely with her.
Yeah, it was unbelievable, because we went into another private hospital in Cape Town, but we were treated so differently. We were engaged. There was empathy. There was care. Sam, the pediatrician would often come in, and instead of spending 3 minutes looking at the charts and leaving, or just ripping Sam's clothes open and leaving him in that state and just going, the pediatrician would spend time with Sam, talk to him, engage him around his toys, and gave us hope. And for the first time in 13 and a half months, or after 13 and a half months, we heard the word home, which is what we were looking for from day one.
So as well, the photographs that you have in the book, you see Sam the whole time with the intubation and you never see his little face. And then in Cape Town, they take it off and you see this gorgeous little face looking up at you.
Yeah, as he got down, they believed that he should not be intubated, so they gave him a trachea, and for the first time, we could see his face. For the first time, we could hear his little voice. For the first time, he could taste. He could be a little boy. He was free to move. It was a wonderful time.
Then he got a lot better and then had a relapse. And when he had a relapse, he needed dialysis, which this private clinic couldn't provide for him, and you had to take him to the Red Cross Children's Hospital. Tell me, what did you learn from taking him from a private hospital into a public hospital?
We learned so much. Firstly, that Red Cross Children's Hospital is probably one of the best hospitals in the world. And we have this perception that only private hospital is good and not, government is not. The second thing is that we got to be amongst people, real people who had children in those same positions. Very often, people who got the same care as my son, which was fantastic, but they didn't even have bus fare to get to their children. And children would die because their parents were unable to just be there.
So you decided then, when Sam passed on, I want to talk about two things. The miracle of the rainbow, which is in the title of your book, and then about the charities that you started after that.
Yeah, when Sam arrived the Sunday night, we had to take a decision to move him from the private hospital. They couldn't do the dialysis. We moved him to Red Cross. Unfortunately, because of a botched operation in Johannesburg, he had peritonitis. When he arrived there, they couldn't do the dialysis. But when we arrived at Red Cross Hospital, there was this incredible ring around the moon. And we looked up, and for us, it was a sign. It was going to be okay. A week later, when Sam passed away, there was the most incredible rainbow in Cape Town. In fact, it was on the newspaper as he passed. And this huge rainbow double rainbow was around Cape Town. We had a funeral in Cape Town, and we drove up through the Karoo. And in the middle of the Karoo, we had another experience with a rainbow. So much so, and I think people would probably think I'm crazy if my wife wasn't in the car with me, that the car was filled. We drove into it, and our car was filled with color. We went after a memorial service for Sam in Johannesburg. We flew to Thailand just to get away for a couple of days. And en route, we stopped off in Hong Kong, and I then started reading up on Chinese mythology. And in Chinese mythology, a ring around the moon is called a moonbow. It's a rainbow, effectively, and it denotes the imminent departure of a saint. And a double rainbow denotes the ascension of a saint to heaven. And then when we arrived in Thailand at our villa, there was this huge blow-up unicorn in the pool. And I read up on unicorns, and effectively the mythology has it that a unicorn would appear to you, impart knowledge on you, and disappear. And that's the title, the lessons that I learned. My goal was to teach Sam all the big mistakes I'd made, and some spectacular ones. And I never got to tell him anything, but he taught me so much.
Now, in the book you give, and people will have to read the book to get to that, you have 7 lessons that you have learned from this and that you impart to your readers. But you also started a charity in the name of Sam. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, we started a trust called Footprints for Sam. It really started a little bit earlier. While Sam was in hospital, I felt I couldn't do anything, so I started running and raising money, initially for rare diseases, South Africa. But when Sam passed, as I mentioned, we promised him his legacy would live on. And the first thing we promised was that no parent would be unable to see their kid at that hospital if their kid passed. And secondly, that a parent whose kid passed can go home with dignity. So we started a trust, and we put a vehicle down, which is already operational in Cape Town, that ensures that happens. We're also involved with advocacy, so we've addressed more than 1,500 medical professionals in the last year, my wife and I. And then we run various other programs in the trust.
Fred, this is fantastic what came out of an enormous tragedy in your life. Thank you so much for coming in and chatting to us.
Thank you, Jill.
And my guest is Fred Platt, and the book is Lessons from a Rainbow Unicorn, a real life story of a father's loss. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you again soon.